All right, today we are continuing in our series in a conversation about wisdom. Wisdom. And we started this series, and I want to give you just kind of a brief, quick synopsis. All of our messages are being posted on YouTube. We have a channel. It's called the Jethro Project. Just go in there, type Jethro Project in the search engine, and you'll see a picture of me that's about 15 years old come up. I still had hair. And you'll know you're on the right channel. But we started this conversation about wisdom. I'm looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 9, where God says this. God says, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. Then you couple that with the next verse, where God says, since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom. So what God was telling us is, listen, what the world wisdom has to offer, the world's understanding, the world's philosophy, the world's reasoning, the world's intellectual capacities, basically for you and I as believers, it's useless. And that what he wanted to do through Christ, through the cross, through the preaching of the cross, was to demonstrate to the world that their wisdom has no relevance in terms of addressing the issues of man's heart and life. And that's why to the world, God's wisdom in Christ is foolishness. You mean you can solve all the issues of man just because some man died on the cross 2,000 years ago? No, we need more than that. But to God, man's wisdom, man's reasoning is foolishness. And to man, God's reasoning is foolishness. See, that's why you can't make this an intellectual proposition. That's why you can't try to appeal to the intellects with intellect and reason, because they'll never get it. God decided that through man's wisdom, we could never come to know his wisdom. It's only by divine revelation that we come to understand it. Then we said this. We decided to take a look at what exactly is wisdom. And we like working definitions here. What's a good working definition? And we said that our working definition is that basically this. Wisdom is practical knowledge of how to live in a skillful manner. Wisdom is skill for living. Would you invite somebody to your house? I just had to do some work on my central air unit. The blow motor kind of went out. And I called this guy and came over. And he had, not only did he have information, he went to school, he had information, but he also had skill on how to fix it. Would you let somebody come to your house and work on this stuff and they say, I read a book on it. I got your car engine. I can change your transmission. I read a book on it. Ain't never did it. Can't apply that knowledge into skill. That's what wisdom is. And many of us, because we have biblical information, we falsely assume we have wisdom. It's not the same. Then we came back and we said, well, God gave us the book of Proverbs in order to teach us wisdom. But what is a proverb? And a proverb is an unforgettable phrase that gives insight about people and life. It's a statement of practical truth. And that in every culture, we have proverbs. We have all grown up with proverbs. They may not have been biblical proverbs, but they are proverbs nonetheless. And every week, we kind of go through some of the proverbs we've grown up with. Here are some. You can't teach an old dog. A fool and his money are. There's a sucker born. Discretion is the better part of. If the shoe fits, easy come. Experience is the. And home is where the. We've all grown up with proverbs. The question is, do we understand God's proverbs, God's insight, God's practical wisdom and knowledge to be able to live life skillfully? So we came back and we said, well, what does wisdom really produce? Why is it a big deal to pursue wisdom? That at the end of the day, wisdom produces this. Righteousness, which is a way of living in harmony with God's design. It produces justice, which is the ability to judge situations according to God's standards, not man's, and equity, which is seeking a level playing field according to God's ways and standards. So at the end of the day, you can discern wisdom by these criteria. If you can't see these criteria in your life and the life of others, you are able now to come to the conclusion that that is not wisdom. Then we looked at the book of Proverbs, and what was it that the book of Proverbs told us that it had to offer for us? Because Proverbs is one of those books that most of us don't read. We know it's there, but we don't read it. And Proverbs has a gift for the simple, to give prudence or shrewdness to the simple. To the young man, it's to give knowledge and discretion or discernment. And for the fool, it provides reproof and correction to help him redirect his path. For the wise man, it enables him to increase his learning. And for the man of understanding, it provides wise counsel. So Proverbs has a little something for everybody. Tell somebody, everybody's covered. Then last week we came and we talked about the voice that wisdom has. Wisdom has a voice. Wisdom talks to us. And we discovered that wisdom shouts in the streets, that it cries out in the public square, and that it calls to all of those who are along the main road. In other words, wisdom is positioning itself to be received of everybody. Wisdom wants to be valued. Wisdom wants to be embraced by everybody. Everyone is positioned to be able to receive, benefit, walk in God's wisdom. Here's the challenge. Proverbs 1:30 tells us this. When wisdom cried out to the simple. Wisdom cried out to the fool. Wisdom cried out to the mocker. It says, come to me and I will share my heart with you. See, it doesn't matter what position we're in. Even if we've been a fool, a mocker, or a simple, wisdom says, come on, let's be intimate. Let me break a little something off for you. But here was their response. They rejected my advice, and they paid no attention when I corrected them. Watch this, verse 31. Because they rejected, wisdom called. Wisdom's advice. What does 31 say? Look at the issues of our lives. Look at the issues of our lives. Stop blaming on the devil. And you can inevitably, in most cases, not all, most cases, trace it back to a violation of wisdom. Because wisdom is about God's principles, of how God has ordered and structured life. Right? It's just like if you were working with electricity, right? If you were working with electricity, would you stand in water? No. Why? You get electrocuted. Because you understand that if you violate that principle, there's a negative consequence. See, many of us, we don't see life that way. We don't realize that there are these principles and precepts that God has established for life, and when you violate them. So wisdom helps us to understand, don't work on electricity in the morning. But here's the final embrace of wisdom. Wisdom gives that stern warning and stern rebuke of what happens when you reject it. But then 33 says, but all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear. Wisdom's desire for you and I is that we are able to live in peace. So that brings us to today's conversation. And today's conversation is the search for wisdom. Ask somebody what you're looking for. What you're looking for. What you're looking for. The search for wisdom. Go with me to Proverbs chapter 2, verse 1 to 5. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 1 to 5. And it reads this. It says, my son, if you receive my words and lay up my commandments with you, so that you incline your ear unto wisdom and apply your heart to understanding, yea, if you cry after knowledge and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver for hidden treasure, then shall you understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. This verse is the opening proposition for us in terms of how do we begin our search for wisdom. And we have to evaluate our heart. That's our goal today. To evaluate our heart. Not whether my neighbor, not whether my brother, my sister, my co-worker, my boss, the lost, the unsaved in the world, not whether or not they are searching wisdom, but whether or not I am searching for wisdom. And there are 4 criteria and prerequisites that are established here for us to evaluate ourselves against if we are going to benefit from wisdom. Let's take a look at this verse and break it down. Y'all know how we like to do. We're going to cut it up, slice it up, dice it up in small, chewable pieces. The conditions of our search. Now, if you look, watch what it says. There are 3 ifs and a then. 3 ifs and a then. It says, if you receive my word. If, then. That sounds conditional, don't it? If, then. Right? Next slide, son. Now, what are the ifs connected to? It says, my son, if you will receive my words, lay up my commandments. Lay up my commandments. That really has to do with, the Bible talks about laying up treasure. That really means treasuring God's commandments in your heart. So it says, if you receive my words, lay up my commandments, if you incline your ear, if you apply your heart to understanding, not your mind, your heart, if you cry after knowledge, if you lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasure, if. Now, highlighted in the yellow for you. How many conditions are attached to the if? Can you count them? So, receive my words. How many? 8. 8 conditions that are attached to the pursuit of wisdom. That if we do these 8 things, then we shall understand the fear of the Lord. What's significant about the number 8? New beginning. New beginning. Oftentimes the world's wisdom tells us if you want to start over in life, you need a better job. Oftentimes the enemy tells us if you want to start over in life, you need a new spouse. You need a new location. You need to do this. You need to do this. The world's wisdom says if you want to begin again, if you want a new beginning, you got to try this, this, this. God says that if you want a new beginning, I got 8 conditions for you. I got 8 conditions for you. Now, we want to break down and explore these conditions. Because God says if you are willing to apply yourself to these conditions, at the end of the road, you're going to get something that's going to benefit you. And next week, we're going to break down the fear of the Lord. I was studying in advance the fear of the Lord on my porch yesterday morning, and I literally broke down crying, repenting to God. We have messed that up. We have messed up what the fear of the Lord is. We have compromised and undermined it until it has no value whatsoever. So let's go down and break this verse down. First, what's the first? My words. And lay up my commandments. See, it requires a willingness. It requires a willingness. There's an invitation. God is a God that offers you and I free will. There has to be a willingness on your part. Do you want to know wisdom? Do you want a new beginning? Do you want to understand what it is to fear the Lord? Do you want to understand God's principles and precepts that he's given so that you and I can live skillfully, so that we can deal with our money skillfully, deal with our spouses, our children skillfully, deal with the gifts and the talents and the callings that God's placed on our life skillfully, walk through this world skillfully? If you're willing, it begins with being receptive to words, being receptive to teaching, being receptive to instruction. It says, if you will receive my words. Then he says, not only do I have to receive them, you're sitting, you're listening, you're receiving, you're hearing, but there's another step you've got to do. Not just receive, but there's an attitude and a value that we have to possess with that which we receive. He says, I have to lay up his commandments. Again, that means to store up like a treasure. You get a little money, right? You go home, you take it out your pocket. You don't just put it anywhere, right? You kind of put it up. Right? Some of us got retirement funds we lay up. That's what it's talking about. That I treat what I receive as a treasure. And I lay it out in my heart. That's where it begins. Without that value for the Word of God. If you don't meet these first two conditions, everything else will be. Everything else will be. Next condition. So I have to receive the Word. I have to value the Word. It says, so that you incline your ear unto wisdom and apply your heart to understand. That I incline my ear. That gives the notion, the concept, the ideal of purposefully and intentionally positioning myself. Having a willingness to hear. It requires an engagement to incline myself unto something. And not only do I have to incline my ear, but I have to incline my heart. Those are the two gateways. Those are the two gateways. What we hear enters our heart. So if our heart is going to change, if I'm going to apply my heart to wisdom, then I have to give my ear, I have to give attention of my ear to what I hear. I have to allow my ear to understand that I'm valuing what I hear. I'm willing to be taught. People today don't want to go anywhere where they're taught. They want to go where they're entertained. They want to go where they don't want understanding. They just want to be filled. I just need to feel good. Life is hard. Life is tough. I just need to feel good because I got these challenges, and I just need to feel good in my challenges. And you don't need to feel good. You need wisdom. You need skill to address your challenges. So he says, I have to incline my ear unto wisdom, unto skillful instruction for living life. And I have to apply my heart to understanding, discernment. Discernment. That's the difference of knowing, and I struggle with this. Be real, I struggle with it. It's the difference. Discernment and understanding is really the difference when my son messes up. Understanding the difference between how I discipline. That's understanding. That's discernment. I struggle because my first inclination is what? Get some tape. That's my first inclination, right? But wisdom and understanding brings me to no. What's the best approach to apply? What's the best approach to apply with my money? What's the best approach to dealing with relationships? That's what understanding provides. Verse 3. Now it gets deeper, right? He says, if you cry after knowledge and lift up your voice for understanding. So first he says, I gotta listen. I gotta be teachable. And I've got to have a value for what I'm hearing. Then I've got to give ear to it. That means I have to consistently hear. And I've got to position my heart. And he says, now when you've done that, there's a downstream impact. And that downstream impact is you're going to cry out. When you cry after knowledge, that's engaging your mouth. When you cry after knowledge and lift up your voice for understanding. This statement implies our recognition of our need for help. When you're in help, when you recognize that you are in a desperate position and you need help, what do you usually do? Help! Take the bags out of the car from the grocery store, you can't handle them all, you call your spouse and you call kids, help! The reason why we don't cry out, we don't really believe we need help. We become comfortable. We are so indoctrinated and so infused with the philosophy and the wisdom of this world. And living life according to this world. This world has a system. It has an order. This world has a kingdom and a principality of its own. And we are trained and conditioned to operate in that. And the moment that we begin to realize that this is not what we are called to, that we've been called from this, and we recognize that we've been translated out of this kingdom into the kingdom of his marvelous Son, from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light, and we begin to realize in order for me to benefit from my citizenship, I need some understanding. I need some knowledge. The moment we begin to realize that, we will cry out. The moment you get sick and tired of being... See, some of us, we got so comfortable in our dysfunction. Come on. You don't cry out. Because for some of us, that's our identity. Our dysfunctionality is our identity. You know those people. Anytime you run into them, they all, my butt hurt, this is wrong, and they did this to me, and it's just like, gosh. Pain is their identity. Affliction is their identity. But they won't cry out. When we cry out after knowledge and lift up our voice for understanding, we are declaring and acknowledging to God that we need him. Verse 4. Here's where it gets good. You see the progressive nature here? Yes, sir. Once I really begin to understand that I need wisdom, I need understanding, not religion, not rules, I need wisdom. Amen. God's perspective on life, understanding of God's precepts and principles for living life skillfully and operating in that with discernment or understanding. Then it leads me to this attitude. He says that you seek her as what? And watch this. I have to seek and search. I have to seek and search. But what's going to drive my seeking and my searching? See, it's one thing to cry out for help, right? It's one thing to cry out for help. But then after you've cried out for help, and this is where a lot of believers stop. After you've cried out for help, the onus is still on who? You. To do something. So then you say, God, I need you. Oh, God, help me. Oh, God, help me. You get up from your prayer and you just go about doing what you was doing. Watch this. After you cry out, you have to seek and you have to search. There's an action conditional on our part. And I have to seek out wisdom as silver. And I have to search for as for hidden treasure. Do we view God's word as treasure? As silver? Proverbs 3 talks about it, that it's more valuable than rubies and gold. Do we like believe that? Don't nod for my sake. Don't nod. Who got a Bible? Somebody give me. Who's got a physical Bible? But they all digital and electronic nowadays. This is my mother, y'all. Thank you, Mom. If I were to tell you that you've got $1 million in an account with your name on it, and I was going to do an exercise today, but I didn't get a chance to do it. I was going to get a couple of $10 bills and tape them under the seat. And tell you, if you believe that there was money on that seat, you'd go for it, wouldn't you? And then some of y'all would have sit there, and then one of y'all would have went, found it, and everybody else would have started looking. If I told you you had money in the bank, you would break your neck to get to that bank and claim what's yours. In this book, God has put the wealth. Amen. He like, no, like real. Seriously. This is more valuable than anything the world has to offer. And the question is, do I believe that? Do I believe that? Is there enough evidence in my life of what I have applied concerning the word that brings me to that conviction? Because if you've never really tried the word, oh, you got saved, you crossed over, but you ain't do nothing else with it since then but show up for church. But if you've ever tried this word, you will come to know and understand it's the most valuable substance on the earth. Amen. And it's readily available. We all have one of these in our house. It's the treasure you and I need. How often do you seek for it? How often do you get in and search through it? Looking for those treasures, looking for those rubies, looking for that gold, looking for that precious substance. Because until I come to that perspective, I'll never get wisdom. I'll have information. I run into a lot of believers, a lot of Christians that have information about God, but don't have wisdom. Wisdom has evidence in life. We must seek godly wisdom as precious silver, and once we found it, with patience, continue to probe and persist in digging that word out. Like a miner digs for gold. The world values diamonds and rubies and the substance of the world so much. You ever see these major diamond mines and the effort that they go through to get to that substance? Are we willing to put forth that same effort? The word search implies a process that takes time. Some of us want to get, we live in an instant society, so we want to jump in, teach me some word, and then think you're going to get wisdom overnight. It takes time. It's a lifetime. Many of us have been walking with the Lord for more than 15 years. It takes time, don't it? It takes time. We have to be patient. We have to think of it as a mining expedition. And at the end of the expedition, it rewards precious fruit and precious substance. And that substance is the knowledge of God and the understanding of Christ. Look at what Colossians 2:3 tells us. Colossians 2:3, speaking of Christ, it says, in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And I believe one of the reasons why so many of us as believers are void of wisdom, void of knowledge, void of understanding is because in our churches we've stopped proclaiming Christ. Because in Him, when I look at Christ, when I page through the scriptures and I see the life of Christ, I see wisdom and understanding, wisdom and knowledge personified. I see skill for living personified. Do you search? Do you seek? Here's a simple test for you to see if you're expending the proper effort towards wisdom. If you worked as hard for your employer as you do for seeking God's wisdom, would you have your job very long? Let me ask that question again. If you worked as hard for your employer as you do, same amount of effort as you would, in seeking God's wisdom, would you have your job very long? See, we work hard. And God is into hard work. Right? God has a lot to say about the diligent. The hand of the diligent shall bear rule. They'll sit before kings and not insignificant men. Everything your hands find to do, do all unto the glory of God. God has a lot to say about the profitable servant, that when you work for someone and the only thing that you've done is what you're supposed to do, you're not profitable, that you're only profitable until you've done more than what's expected of you. So God supports diligent effort for our employers. But do we put that same effort towards seeking wisdom? See, because what we get from our employers is a wealth that's tangible in this world. What we get from seeking God is a wealth that's tangible in the spiritual world, but if you understand how to apply it, it has evidence in the natural. See, we work hard because we want that money. Let our check come up short. We down in HR, quick, fast, in a hurry. Right? But do we value God's wisdom? There's a story that's told of Socrates. Socrates, ancient Greek philosopher. And a young man came to Socrates one day and he said, Socrates, I want to be one of your disciples. I want you to teach me. Teach me wisdom. Socrates said, okay, come on, young man, follow me. He said, young man, follow me. And he took the young man down to the edge of the lake. And they walked in the water. He took the young man by the strap of the neck. And he plunged his head down beneath the water. And he held him there. The young man was thrashing. The young man was fighting. And Socrates, he was old, but he still had that old country strength. He was holding him down. And finally, he let the young man come up. And the young man came up from air with a big gasp. He said, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And Socrates looked at him and said, when you hunger for wisdom, the same way you hungered for air, then I can teach you. Whoa. Whoa. Some of us, we don't hunger. We don't hunger. We don't meet the criteria for wisdom. But you know what the rule is here that we always say. If that's you, that's okay. You've just identified yourself. You've just located yourself. There's grace and there's help. All you got to do is say, okay, God, I'm tired of being here. Let's get on with the journey. But we've got to be honest with ourselves. Honest with ourselves. Here's what it looks like to hunger. Psalm 119, verse 97 to 100. Watch this. Oh, how I love thy law. It is my meditation all the day. Through thy commandments. Thy commandments have made me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more understanding than all of my teachers, for thy testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients because I keep thy precepts. Notice, what is the source of his wisdom, his understanding, his knowledge? It's the law, the commandments, that testimonies, that precepts. These are all different ways of saying his word.
Amen.
His word. Next slide, son. Watch what he says. He says, on that law, he meditates all day long.
Amen.
Blessed is the man who walketh not in the way of the ungodly, standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. And on that law he does meditate both day and night. What do you meditate on? It'll define your hunger. He says, through thy commandments. I got my wisdom from where? I got it from God's commandments. He says, for they are ever with me. For thy testimonies are my meditation. I'm meditating on thy word. I'm meditating on thy testimonies, and they give me understanding. He says, and I understand more than the ancients. The psalmist is saying, all of my wisdom, all of my knowledge, all that is elevated and positioned me, it comes, God, from thy word, from thy commandments, from thy testimonies, from thy precepts, from your word. It's more than a 5-minute devotional book in the morning so that you can check off a spiritual obligation. It is hungering and thirsting after righteousness. For they that hunger and thirst after righteousness shall be filled. Filled with what? Wisdom, knowledge, understanding. What are you meditating on? What are you hungering for? What are you thirsting for? All of that, all of those criteria are necessary to be in place. If you need a new beginning, you want a new beginning. And remember, we talked about last week how in different areas of our lives, we can be the fool and the mocker and the naive. I can understand God's wisdom, His principles, His precepts in one area, but totally be neglecting them in another area. And in one area of my life, I'm wise. The other area of my life, I'm a fool, I'm a mocker, I'm naive. God wants to bring you and I to this place. Next slide, son. The reward of the search. When we meet these criteria, when we hunger and we thirst after righteousness, when we're willing to seek for it, when we're willing to incline our ear, lay it up in our heart, when we're willing to apply ourselves and to cry out for it, what's the reward of the search? Hit me with that next slide, son. What's the reward of the search? Read this with me. Then shall you understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. See, you can't know God without fearing God. You can't come to the point where you really fear the Lord until you've met the prerequisite requirements for wisdom. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise knowledge. Fools despise knowledge. When we don't take the time to cry out, to seek, to search, to value, to lay up, to store up, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But the reality and the truth is, we are fools and mockers. And we will eat the bitter fruit of our own schemes and ways. And we keep crying out to God, and we wonder why God doesn't answer our prayer. Remember we said last week that wisdom says that after you've messed up, after you've gone your own way because you're rejected by wisdom, I'm going to laugh when you call out. I'm going to mock at your calamity. And it's not that God is laughing or mocking the pain that we experience. He's laughing at and he's mocking the fact that they really thought that was going to work. They really thought that was going to work. They really thought that by going through life hanging on to bitterness, not loving individuals, they really thought that that was going to give them some happiness and peace and joy. I don't know what they were thinking. That's what God is saying. How are us going to come to the place where we qualify ourselves for wisdom? Where we can come to the place where we are able to understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. It begins with the criteria. It begins with the search. It begins with you and I committing ourselves, to incline ourselves, to pursue ourselves, to receive His word, to treasure His commandments, to incline our ear, to apply our heart, to cry after, to lift up our voice, and to seek and to search. Father, thank you